non-profit organization that collects and verifies and analyzes atrocities across the world. Primarily, we're working in Ukraine, for example, but we also work in other geographies like Afghanistan and Sudan and Myanmar as well. Today, we've got not too much time, so I want to go through two kind of presentations for you. The first will be this OSINT sort of approach to the red zone, also known as the human safari in Kherson. I'm afraid that it's somewhat graphic, I'm sorry, but I've done my best to cut most of it out. And when I primarily talk about OSINT, I'm talking about open source intelligence, which is, I suppose you could call it digital traces or digital forms of evidence collection. What I mean by that is, for example, verified videos and photos of, in this case, war crimes conducted by Russian forces in Ukraine. So, without further ado, we will begin with the story of the red zone and the human safari. Effectively, what we did was, we're inside of these Telegram channels set up by Russians and by soldiers of the Russian army, but also members of the so-called LPR and DPR as well. And what these channels are basically doing is showing, as you can see on the screen, the drone-dropped ordnance of sort of bombing and targeting civilians. In this case, we're looking primarily at an ambulance being targeted by Russian forces, which, for example, they will post imagery and photos and videos suggesting that these are all enemy combatants, right? These are not civilians. And we're able, with OSINT, to corroborate this information. For example, here we have local Ukrainian volunteers, which we're able to basically corroborate that this is the same incident as the one that the Russian channel will be posting. So, effectively, in this case, we're using geolocation, which is the technique of proving where something is, not when something was. That's more chronolocation, to basically prove that this event is happening and to prove the specific characteristics of these events. And here's the video, for example. We've collected upwards of 300 of these videos, also photos, but this is obviously a small part of the picture, as I'm sure you'll all be aware. It's more so in the thousands, but we're based primarily on visual evidence rather than textual information. So, for example, the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine will have more of a clear understanding of the numbers. We're only really dealing with the visual side of it. So, looking into these Russian channels, it began kind of in January 2024. There were claims of this creation of something called a red zone, which is a Russian invention to state that there's no such thing as civilians in Kherson and Antonivka, but also further afield in places like Beryaslav. And basically, here's what they kind of say. Movement of any light transport in the red zone means taking measures to destroy it. And effectively, what this is it's a siege by proxy. So it's a way of control without actually occupying a city, in this case, Kherson and Antonivka. This area stretched from Kherson city down towards the Dnipro River and included the expansion last year in August 2025, but also actually in July, this creation of a red zone in the highway sections, right? So the M14 highway, a lot of the arteries that were entering and leaving Kherson, further sort of indicating this sense of control. This is what an OSINT approach to these kind of incidents look like. You can kind of see on the screen here, all of these blue points are verified by geolocation, chronolocation, and then sort of general analysis of Russian targeting of civilians. This includes, for example, civilian infrastructure. It also includes civilians themselves, but also civilian vehicles too. Thank you. And we've collected upwards of 300. Of course, as I say, it's a lot larger than that. So if we're looking through time, we can first see that this trend started with Antonivka and the Dniprovsky district, of eastern Kherson. And we saw this in July 2024. Despite them saying it started in January, it really sort of took hold in July. moved on to central Kherson city, which they colored in orange, not us. And here they used a combination of drone-dropped ordnance, FPVs, as well as the dropping of remote mines. In this case, petal mines, which are more akin to sort of a child's toy as well. Further, they went to further to the west, which increased in 2025, and included, in this area, it was primarily to do with transport links. So for example, trams, trolley buses, and any such way of entering and leaving the city. And then the penultimate two, we have the industrial area, the southern industrial area. This place is targeted a lot by traditional artillery, but also grads, rockets, but also, as we've seen, the transport routes are targeted with FPVs and with drone-dropped ordnance. So, in January 2025, we noticed that Russian forces expanded the attacks to attack civilian vehicles on the E97 highway. They then included Bilozerka, which is a sort of suburb, a village outside of Kherson to the west. And then lastly, recently in July 2025, but also in August, we noted an expansion of FPV drone attacks on the M14 highway, where, for example, the rabbi was targeted as one of these cases. And here we have a breakdown by munition. So you'll notice there's 3 different colors, the first being drone-dropped ordnance, which started, if you can see my cursor, on the sort of eastern side towards Antonivka. Moved towards the middle, you can see a slight increase of the green color, the green being FPVs, and then purple being mines as well. And so what I want to kind of impress on you is this notion of tracking, right? This is something that we can entirely do ourselves, and basically we can identify trends and changes with these kind of strikes. So here we can see drone-dropped ordnance, which is very typical. And this is obviously what it looks like. We're all kind of familiar with this at this point. And then the expansion of FPVs. And these were marked in green. These started a lot more frequently in January 2025. We saw an increase of these kind of drones towards more of the center of the city, but also on the highways as well. So you'll note, for example, right up here as well, this is the E97, which went further afield. And of course, this is what the kind of event will look like. It's very clear, by the way, for us at least, that these are civilian areas and these are very much civilians being targeted. And here you can see a Russian FPV drone chasing a civilian truck in central Kherson. So, mines as well. This was a big problem and has been a big problem. We've noticed since 2024. This case, for example, is in October 2024, and these are PFM1 petal mines. And this, we were able to identify the culprits, the perpetrators of these crimes. This being the Haber team, which is part of the 18th Army in the Russian Armed Forces. You can see here he's using like a box cutter to connect these mines so they're droppable in civilian areas. And this, for example, is what they would look like. So it's very obvious to us, at least, that this is a very deliberate attempt to conduct a kind of siege, but also it's a form of psychological control and indiscriminate killing, basically. And here we have the timeline of events. And you'll note that this starts in July 2024, and about halfway is January 2025. And by the way, we continue to report on this and continue to see the spike, of course, as you will all know. And also one thing to note here is that the more green you start to see further afield, so the M14 highway as well, these are all FPV drones. So, penultimate thing I'll cover on Kherson drones is the targeting of emergency services. We obviously know that this happens across Ukraine, primarily from areas of occupied Ukraine by Russian forces. There's something of a directive in this case. We have heard, for example, intercepts from Russian forces dictating that this is a fully intentional strategy. And in the case of Kherson, we collect all of these incidents. Typically, they'll look like this as of recent. These are FPV, of course, strikes against DSNS in Kherson, particularly in suburbs like Bilozerka and the surrounding area of places like previously Antonivka, which is really not accessible anymore. This is Phobos Kherson. Phobos is a Russian drone team as part of the 18th Army Group. Through a series of profiling, which in an OSINT context is the identification and attribution of individuals conducting these kind of crimes, which I'll cover in a few minutes. Phobos are very prolific in these cases, and we've actually been able to identify the identities of these perpetrators, of Phobos, but also of Habateam, that other group that we saw earlier. So, further on, this is what I was talking about with the highway. This is our most recent kind of collection phase. This is the M14 highway, which we can see here. And all these little green dots you can see are FPV strikes by Russian forces. And these are targeting almost, I mean, of course, there will be some military targets, but almost exclusively they're targeting civilians. For example, as I mentioned earlier, this would be the strike on the chief rabbi of Kherson. And this is a compilation video, actually. It's kind of supposed to be for a fundraising event for Russian forces. This team was called the Hateful Eight, or the Disgusting or Repulsive Eight. We found after some time we're able to identify the identity of the commander, identify what specific military subunit they're part of, and from this we can build an idea of culpability, not only from a kind of ground-up way, but also if we're talking about the difference between the drone operators and also the commanders as well. And here we can see a sort of a collection of the compilation. You'll notice that they all have the same watermark. These guys are not very careful about culpability and speaking about that kind of thing. So, in conclusion for this, we basically assessed that Russian forces are conducting a remote occupation of this area. They're also using Kherson and Antonivka as a training ground. We've seen that in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station as well. And lastly, they want to inflict as much harm on the population as physically possible, but also on a psychological level. This is something that we have noticed across Ukraine, particularly with drone operations against civilians, but particularly in Kherson. So, now I'll move on to profiling and culpability, and basically how we use OSINT to identify Russian perpetrators, but in this case, we're also identifying Russian positions as well. So there is a prolific thing in Russian social media of geotagging photos. So when I'm talking about OSINT and digital traces, we're talking a lot about accidental things that are uploaded. This is a map of the temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine, but also you can see Rostov on the bottom right of my screen, and also elements of actual Russia itself. These were uploaded, these are all photos from VK of the Kontaktia, which have been geotagged effectively, pretty accurately, and I'll show you what I mean, in the past 5 days. So this includes, for example, places like Melitopol. It also includes a lot of places like Donetsk, Luhansk, but also you'll notice, and I'll show you in a few slides, also the sort of frontline locations as well. So let's say we're going to stick on Kherson Human Safari, and particularly around culpability and perpetrator analysis. I can run this script. It's a kind of coding software. It's very simplistic, I promise. In Kherson. And you'll notice here, these are all VK geotag photos from the last 5 days, since yesterday, around places like Oleshki. So, we run the script and this is what we find. You'll notice on the right, it said uploaded yesterday. I captured this yesterday as well. And what this is a Russian military position. It's a Russian soldier in a dugout. He's, I think, blissfully unaware that we have access to this information. And so what can I find from this? In many, many, many cases, when you have a Russian soldier or a Russian individual who is posting something with poor OPSEC, OPSEC being operational security, he'll often not only leave breadcrumb of clues in terms of big things like locations, but also small things like unit affiliation, name, passport information, etc., phone numbers as well. And so, for example, if we went to this guy's profile, you can see I learned two things. The first on the left is what unit this guy's in. I can identify that in Oleshki, where he's stationed, probably a member of the Russian Marine Corps, most likely the Sevastopol flotilla, is operating in this area. Maybe it's 155th Marines, maybe it's someone else. The other thing I can find as well is the other geotag photos. You'll note here that he's staying in the same dugout position. Of course, it's probable that he may have moved and then only posts this information in a place that he has like secure Wi-Fi. Hence why a lot of these photos are kind of different, but they're in approximately the same place. And you can see like a Shashlik Kalashnikov kind of thing. So if we expand this search, and let's say I wanted to look somewhere between Kremina, Liman, and Yampil, which, like the forest of which Russian forces are consistently active and they're operating all the time, I can find individuals like this guy. And this guy, we can go to his profile and see everything else that's been geotagged. In that case, you can see that he's been moving, basically. Oops. He, for example, he'll be posting one picture here, he'll be sort of moving to his next position, post another photo, and then he'll enter another position here. So here he's hanging out with his other friends, here he's walking down the street, and then this is his previous position. As a kind of note on operational security, which is important for both Ukraine and Russia, luckily it's very easy to exploit Russian OPSEC. This is very recent photos. These photos have been uploaded in the past week, all of the ones I'm showing you. And so it's a substantial issue. When I talk about OPSEC, this is also a significant problem for Russian forces. This is basically a charity or a cleric or something that goes to frontline positions, and he geotags the photos. So bad OPSEC equals good OSINT. So this guy, for example, started in Samara in Russia. He then travels to visit almost seemingly every frontline position in the left bank of Ukraine, in Kherson, and he ends up in this area. So between Oleshki, Holepristan, and then further south, he's kind of going up to these soldiers and saying, oh, congrats, like everything, blah, blah, blah. And we're able to capture that information. We're able to collect all of the geotagged information from that, which basically means we can see where Russians are posted, and also those who are responsible for things like human safari. If particularly they're drone operators, it may be more clear to us to match culpability and perpetrator analysis. So how accurate are these points? The short answer is very accurate. Basically, VK, Vkontakte, has a consistently very good geotag setting. They are, unless there's interference, which you'll get around air bases, etc., they're very, very accurate. So this guy, this was uploaded 2 days ago, he's hanging out in his dugout in the basement of this house. And he also posts another one last week in the same location. So we can, from that, identify, for example, where Russian forces are and where they're going to be moving to as well. So when we talk about innovation and coding, particularly in the context of this forum, we can adapt these kind of scripts. It seems complicated. When we're talking about scripts and coding and Python, it's something that I don't have any formal understanding of, but ChatGPT does. And so what I can do is I can alter the way that it looks, right? So I can say, how about I want to find Russian geotag positions between May 2023 and November 2025. And I also want to set a radius of each point to 50 kilometers, and I want it to be near Oleshki in Kherson Oblast. I can very easily do that. I can create this. And this map is very kind of clear and very recent. And you'll see that there's a kind of circle you can identify in the map. That's the 50-kilometer radius I'm talking about. So this is the result of what I found in the past week from the left bank of Kherson Oblast. There's a lot of a sort of band of merry men who don't leave positions. For example, At the top right, this is in the forest near Oleshki. The top as well in the same batch of forest, but he doesn't really move. These guys on the left and on the bottom were sort of new to rotation, it seemed, and had been there for like 5 days before posting. We know that because they posted previously. All this kind of stuff. We can get a lot of information from them. And this final slide on this, we're kind of highlighting, this is all from the past 24 hours, most from the past 12 hours, I think. So on the top left, the Russian guy, that's near Kupiansk. The top is Kupiansk and surrounding Kharkiv Oblast, and the bottom is sort of towards Crimea, but also in Donetsk Oblast as well. So the point here is that, particularly when we're focusing on prisoner of war executions or the bombing of civilian infrastructure or civilians themselves, you may think that it's very difficult to identify perpetrator analysis, particularly when you don't have the powers of closed source information from the state. But this is kind of proving to you that actually, if enough people, particularly Russians in this case, Russian soldiers, make consistent mistakes which remain unfixed, it's very easy to find that information. So for the last 15 or so minutes, I want to cover a case that we did in 2023, but we updated it recently to identify perpetration analysis. In this case, this was basically a torture report. A lot of torturing was happening in Izium in 2022 in Kharkiv Oblast. And what this investigation found was, first, the presence of a specific battalion. The next, we identified that Russian soldiers had Ukrainian captives at a known torture site, and we also identified their actual identities. And then also we found 2 other bases nearby torture sites by Russian forces. So we start with school number 6, which is the center of this investigation. This is one of the first torture sites that we investigated, and you'll notice through satellite imagery that there's been a buildup of Russian forces. So the first on the left is pre-war satellite imagery. The next is the 25th of March, 2022. And then the last is the 3rd of July, 2022. And OSINT is not just social media, it's also satellite imagery. And for example, we can see, if I zoom into the center, you can see these trenches that are being built. And this is a school. And we know that it was likely that Ukrainian forces left on the 20th of March and that Russians moved in on the 22nd. These trenches were built after the Ukrainians left and just after the Russians moved in. So we can kind of confirm presence anyway. But what I wanted to do was identify who these people are, right? I wanted to identify the identity of these individuals who are likely perpetrators. We began with this guy, Roman Razum, who's one of my favorite Russian propagandists because he posts the most information without really being prompted. It's amazing. He is a propagandist, an actor, a soldier, etc. And he has this series called Humanitarian Front, where he goes to the front line and visits Russian soldiers in various areas and basically says, like, how are you guys doing? Like, I hope everything's okay. But he never really discloses where he is specifically. He gives you a kind of idea, but not really. One of these videos was posted in April 2022. And basically, he said, I'm in Izium with elements of the 202nd and the 204th regiments. We didn't necessarily know anything about these groupings. We didn't know who they were. We didn't know what their mission was. And so we had to basically combine all of this other OSINT and other information that we could get from primarily Russian state media and also Russian archival imagery and media to identify who these guys were and what they were doing. So what we first did is we mapped out this visit. What he would do in Izium, for example, is he would drive to this area, which is where Russians were based. Once he gets there, he sort of pans the camera around and shows us like key features in the video which we could identify as locations. And what we'll do is we'll use this thing called geolocation. And geolocation, as I mentioned previously, is matching up a location with somewhere else, right? Sort of saying, confirming that this location is where it says it is. And we were able to do that in Izium. And here we could basically qualify and confirm that this was school number 6 in Izium itself. What we'll do then is look at the imagery in totality and not start to mark up what we see. So here we can identify exactly where they were outside of school number 6 and sort of suggest like, okay, here they put the boxes and this is where they unload the truck. Then the video goes to this scene, which is a terrible video because it's Roman Razum, this propagandist, forcing these Russian soldiers to listen to his music. And here they're inside this very, I would say, unique room. There's 2 substantial features in here, or I suppose 3. The first is the checkerboard floor, the squared floor. The second is the kind of transparent clock. And then there's this green wallpaper. And what we were able to do is go to the local Facebook group for school number 6. We thought it was school number 6, but we weren't necessarily sure. And we were able to find this room itself. And by confirming it here, we're sort of doing interior geolocation and confirming that these soldiers, who may or may not be the same ones we saw outside, were also inside the school. And so we link together these formations. We find photos from the outside and photos from the inside, and we compare and contrast who these people are. And here you'll note that on the left-hand side of each pair is inside, and then on the right-hand side is outside. And we noticed similarity. Some of the people were slightly different, but most were exactly the same. And here we have a really important micro detail. When Roman Razum would go to this location and similar videos afterwards, he would ask these guys, like, oh, say a nice thing for home. One of them said, this guy in the middle waving, he was like, oh, you know, well-wishing from Kirovsk in Luhansk Oblast. And we sort of thought nothing of it, but we noted it anyway in this investigation. In this scene, he also references them as specifically the 5th Battalion of the 204th Regiment, which we ran with as an assumption, and we had to confirm it ourselves. So, again, luckily, they were very forthcoming with information, and they left the imagery of the boxes you can see on the left. It says 204th Polk, 5th Battalion, and they also had this Novorossiya patch a few of them were wearing. It was a hodgepodge of people and uniforms, and they looked really poorly disciplined and everything. And so they had 3 different videos, April, May, and June. And when they came here, they did the same thing. They unloaded the boxes, they did the well wishes, whatever. But importantly, they left this information on the boxes. This information is 50-50 between what unit I'm in and my full name and patronymic. And this goes all the way down to the platoon and sometimes squad level. And from that, we can build this, which is an order of battle or an ORBAT, basically saying like, okay, the 204th we knew was there, the 5th Battalion we knew was there, but who in the different sections of the 5th Battalion were there and what's their role? And we were able to make this, it's inherently partial because we weren't relying on information that we would be able to verify as in terms of news sources and everything. This is pure visual investigation and visual evidence collection. And so the last question we wanted to ask was, who are these men, right? We have where they were, which was a torture site. We have what unit they're part of, which is the 5th Battalion, 204th Regiment. But we wanted to identify exactly who these men were. And that is an important part of perpetrator analysis and the identification and evaluation of war crimes as a kind of field of OSINT. So, Roman Razum posted this image. He posted a series of 2 images. This is the first one. It had been previously unknown where this was, but just where you can see my mouse, this scaffolding was also visible in the boxes video when he panned it around. And so we use things like facial recognition to basically do this, which is identifying exactly who they are, where they live, passport information, phone numbers, etc. And within that, we can also attribute them to specific squads or platoons or whatever, depending on what we really want to achieve. Razum then goes inside, and he takes this photo. This photo is, you may not see it, but it's incredibly high quality. It's like 4K quality, which is great for me because I can then use photo recognition software, primarily free software, and I can do this, which is identify the remaining of the force. So now we have probably a good half, at least, of the battalion, of which we knew that they were in school number 6, being a torture site, and we knew they were there between April all the way to June, end of June. There was one video in July, but we don't really count it. This guy here, this one, he is the commander of the battalion, and he had this really obvious AC/DC, the band magazine on his gun that he'd carry everywhere, so even if he had a balaclava on, you could still see him. And this is how it works. So you may recognize this guy as he was the guy who waved and said, "I'm from Kirovsk." We found his VK page, and he confirms to us that he's from Kirovsk, which is super useful. Important thing to note, kind of boring thing to note, is archiving. Archiving is the most important element of OSINT for preservation of evidence collection. If, for example, I was one of these soldiers, like this guy, and I'd heard that somebody was investigating me, be it SSU or PGO or an international organization, the first thing I would do would be delete my VK. However, when you're conducting investigations with OSINT, as a practical exercise, I guess, you must archive material. What this does is it preserves information. It means that if I want to delete my VK, I simply can't. So, we've got 3 minutes left. Just small thing to add, if there's any questions, first of all, of any of these cases, but also techniques and tools, you're free to ask now, but also you can find me at the corner of the expo. If, for example, you have another question that you want to email our team, please email Yulia Infores or Ukraine Infores, which is our country director, who's right there. But yeah, if not, дуже дякую for your attention. It's been great. Thanks for having us, of course.
If you have a question in the room, you may ask it.
You can ask it in Ukrainian. I have translation.
No, I'll be in English. So it was very eye-opening, I would say, and thank you and your team for the work. When we look at the OSINT as an efficient tool to document war crimes, do you provide that information to some human rights organizations? And if so, what names are they?
It's a good question. Depends on the organization. We do cooperate with Ukrainian judicial partners in the country. In other geographies, that cooperation will look different. But typically speaking, supranational organizations and national organizations that are doing this kind of work on a judicial basis, think about like the PGO or something as an example, they are noticing, and it's the same in my country, in the UK, that OSINT is an incredibly important tool and can be, if done correctly, admissible in court. And that's a good lesson, primarily from Ukraine, I think, that a lot of international and national organizations have learned, if that answers your question. So the answer is yes, we do. You're welcome.
So, Mr. Cullen, thank you so much. Thank you for this workshop and for this speech and for all this information. Ваші оплески Роло Колін, старший розслідувач проєкт Eyes on Russia.
Your applaud to Rollo Collins.
І ми
And
рухатися далі. У нас
And so we can proceed. We've got a special guest that it is my pleasure to invite to this stage. It is Vitaly Klitschko, Mayor of Kyiv. Please give him a round of applause. He will make a very brief presentation. I was told he's here. Okay, bear with me a minute, and we will welcome Mayor Klitschko, and he will tell us about how the capital city remains resilient. And it will be an introduction to a public discussion dedicated to the topic code of humanity and resilience. We speak about resilience, human resilience, but it can be manifested at the level of an individual, but also at the level of a community. After shellings, you feel it when the windows are shattered, but coffee shops continue to operate and they serve you coffee. So here is Mayor Klitschko. Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to greet you all. Thank you for the invitation. I agreed at once because it's extremely important to communicate with the young people, to communicate with the residents of Kyiv, to be on the same page, to know what the challenges are and how to address them together. To that end, we come together, we conduct discussions, we exchange opinions, we make very important steps in order to overcome those difficulties. And each and every one of us is asking him or herself, when will this war be over? When will we be able to get back to normality of sorts? When will the time come when we don't
укриттях, бомбосховищах, але ніхто не може зараз на це питання відповісти. І
There's no sound. Thank you. And I would like to send out this key message to you. It's in the nature of human life that only strong are respected. So strong we should be, strong individually, strong inside the country, strong when we talk to our partners. The capital city is extremely important because it is the basis of our capacity to stand up to the challenges of today. And I keep asking myself, what's the purpose of destroying a civilian city, destroying our infrastructure, killing our people, civilian residents? Because Russians claim that they only target military installations, but that's not true. They destroy our energy infrastructure facilities, they destroy our HPPs, our substations. They want us to be depressed, to be weak. They want us to stop resisting. They want us to leave this country and leave it vacant for the Russians. They don't need our people, they only need our land. And that's what they've proven several times, many times so far. In our civilian city, and I'm speaking about civilians only, we had over 300 casualties. These are civilians who were killed by Russians. More than 30 children are among them. More than 2,000 houses are either totally pulverized or badly damaged, whereas cruise missiles, with ballistic missiles, with the Shahed drones. And I remember when I was in the team of first rescuers at the hit site, I found several small balls, and those were parts of the cluster munition. Their purpose is extremely to kill people, to kill civilians, as many of them as possible. And that's exactly what we face on a daily basis. And despite all, we work hard to defend our civilians, to make sure that the city continues to provide services, public services to the population, to its residents. We have 300,000 workers of different areas that contribute to the war economy. That is a city within a city. Then we have to think about public transportation, about medical institutions, educational institutions, utility services that provide heat, electricity, water to the residents of Kyiv. And we have huge shortage of people. We have more buses than the bus drivers, because bus drivers are mostly men, and men have been mobilized, have been recruited to go to the front line. So now we have to train women to be bus drivers. We have huge shortage of construction workers, of electricians, of the heat engineers, but still this city is standing tall and it continues to provide services. The challenges are immense and extremely difficult, but yet again, we have to be strong, we have to be resilient, we have to contribute in our respective places, in our respective capacities to help this city survive. But what irritates me, what makes me incredibly angry is that our enemy does not understand us, but some of the politicians play into their hand when they start talking about potential speedy and soon elections. Now, Russians are not interested in Donetsk, Luhansk, or the Crimea. They are interested in capturing Kyiv, in destroying Ukraine as a country, depriving us of our statehood. So it is a matter of our future, of our independence, of our sovereignty, and we should do our best to rebuff this aggression, to retain our people in homes, to preserve our country, our sovereignty, and our independence. And some politicians now think about future elections rather than about the future of this country. That's very wrong. They behave as if it is not their war, if it is not their cause. More than 300,000 Kyiv residents are now serving at the front line. And we, the city, have been deprived of the development budget because 10 billion hryvnias were donated by the city to the armed forces of Ukraine, but we were deprived of the development budget. And yesterday we donated another 800 million hryvnias to support our defense forces. These are challenging times indeed. I won't be telling you about our budget difficulties, but we need to make sure that the infrastructure is up and running, that the city is operating, and that the residents are served. Another thing that makes me red under my collar is that the city is being robbed in violation of the constitution, of the budget code, of the national legislation. As I said, it was robbed of 8 billion hryvnias. We would have understood it had this money been channeled to the armed forces of Ukraine. But this money was transferred to the Ukrainian Rail, which is a very dignified, very honest company, but it was used to give kudos to everyone in Ukraine, even those people who are not people in need. But you will know that we in Kyiv have lots of questions related to that. So we have to find answers to those questions. I'm not here to complain, to express my grievances, but rather to raise certain issues that we can discuss together and address together. And we are working against time, against all odds, to keep this city alive. And very few people know what needs to be done so that people have electricity in their houses. Very few people know what needs to be done to water supply to be available, and nobody seems to be interested in that. But dozens of thousands of people work around the clock to make sure that we are alive and kicking. But we are holding the line, aren't we? Yes, we are. Yeah. And we are strong, and we do not miss punches. No, punches we don't miss. Right. And I would like to thank, I understand that we have to finish this introductory speech. Yes, indeed, I will stop soon. You know, the position of the mayor is a demanding one. The schedule is punishing. I used to be a member of parliament together with Arseniy, and the mayoral position is rewarding. Because whereas parliamentarians declare certain good things, we are there on the ground to change people's lives for the better every day. So it is rewarding on the one hand, but on the other, there are lots of things that are beyond your power, that are beyond your reach. And I would have never coped with this challenge but for the wonderful team who support me. So now we will have a panel discussion, and we will discuss the issues that you've raised together. You are a moderator, you can moderate, and I will be answering the questions for it not to turn into a speech. Now, a round of applause to Vitaly Klitschko, Kyiv mayor. Now we will have a panel of very esteemed citizens, and we will be discussing how the capital city responds to all of those hits and other challenges. When I after the sleepless night go out of the shelter, I see that the waste is managed, the garbage is being collected, the water is running, the electricity is there, and as I said, coffee is brewing. So we've spoken a lot about technologies. We are all surrounded by technologies right here and right now, and we see how, thanks to the intellect, how human intellect, how to the technologies we manage to move ahead. So technologically, we are very advanced, but ethically, we turn to Plato's literature, and we still get inspirations there. So in these times, how can we balance? How can we remain human beings, again, despite all of the challenges of today? So now I will be giving the floor to, or inviting, the panelists. It's Serhiy Volynskiy, Marine Corps veteran, hero of Ukraine. Olena Tolkachova, head of the Patronage Service, 3rd Army Corps. Their service is called Angels. Then Yulia Chikolba, Country Director, Center for Information Resilience. And Alexander Teren-Budko, veteran and civic activist. And Vitaly Klitschko, Kyiv mayor.
Mr. Klitschko, please come back to us. Wherever you like.
Я би хотіла розпочати розмову.
I'd like to start by asking Serhiy. First, you are a legendary person. You've been through Azovstal, you've been through the hell of Olenivka, the Russian captivity. Now you're helping our Marines who have been through captivity, who have been through hell on earth. In your opinion, where's the source of resilience of those people and yours? Thank you. Greetings, everyone. I believe for us, the families are our source of resilience, first and foremost, and the trials that lie on the shoulders of our first responders, railroad workers, and all those who provide the livelihood of our country. All of them encounter terrible challenges of the war, but we all do this for the sake of our families and for our country in general. But for as long as our country stands, individual people pay with their life and health for that. Alena, your patronage service first, it was called Angels. I think you were the first to establish this service, which is called patronage in our country. You work with the bereaved, you work with the relatives of those who are at the front line. What are the topics that people still refuse to talk about in the context of this war? And what price do we pay for this resilience? Well, you said that moral principles fail to catch up with the technologies which are being developed, if I understand you correctly. What I see in our society is that the society has not yet fully grasped the entire importance to afford proper respect to those who defend us. A lot of it is being said about having to respect veterans, to support them, to help them. People say that we have to support the veterans coming back from the front line so that they would not create any risky situations in the society, because these are people who are trained to kill, and we have to do our utmost to help them reintegrate with the civilian society. But all this is kind of artificial. As a matter of fact, we just have to learn to understand them and to help them from the bottom of our hearts. Not in order to prevent them from doing something, not in order to prevent them becoming criminals, but simply out of respect. And once we manage to demonstrate our respect properly, this will be the answer. The way we do it in our Corps. We do not leave anyone without our attention. Even those who leave the army for health reasons, they are within the scope of our attention, and they know that they always can come back to us for help. And this is the expression of respect that we accord them, and the sign of a moral resilience of the society. Our society should emulate patronage services and charitable funds which deal with the problems of veterans on a daily basis. And we have to try to do as good a job as they do. And that does not require huge sponsors, funds, or large projects. You can just help a veteran to come to the hospital, to get to the hospital, and help them talk to the doctors, because very often our veterans get negative feedback about the war from hospitals and doctors. Like, for instance, some people say, we did not send you there, and it's really painful for the veterans to hear that. This is pure disrespect to people who volunteered to defend their country. Now, even though we almost never hear phrases like that, but the very conduct of certain services show a obvious lack of empathy. So people should be alert to that. They should not be persuaded. They should not need being persuaded to do this. All this should come straight from the heart. People who came to the front line, they made their choice, and they were ready to lay down their lives for you. Now ask yourself, what can you offer this person? At least it should be respect and support. And the society should understand this, finally. Thank you for these words. Well, obviously, when some people complain that the streets are blocked at 9 o'clock when we observe the moment of silence, it says a lot. Irina, you were wounded in 2022, and you've witnessed the change in attitude to the veterans in our society. Have there been any changes in these attitudes?
Прямим, так, менш красномовним, то, напевно, якби...
Well, I'd like to be straightforward here. If we had some real changes for the better in our society, probably we wouldn't have to raise this issue at each and every forum that we hold. This is not the first forum I attend, and time again we speak about how important it is to afford a proper respect and reverence to our veterans, which means that things are not changing.
Повинні навчитись поважати хоча б один одного.
But before we start respecting veterans, we should learn to respect each other and understand that we are all citizens. So we should be mutually respectful. If this is in place, respect for the veterans will come. Just be human, respect your fellow citizens, irrespective of their status, their position, and so on. If you do this, automatically the respect for veterans will come, because it's obvious that a person who defended us automatically should be accorded all the respect we can give.
Але форуми це теж, ну, коротше, про це треба говорити, бо
Well, we have to raise this issue.
якби це не буде ніяк рухатись. Тому поки ми говоримо про це, це все ще є, і це все ще підігріває, скажімо, цю тему, всі дискусії навколо цієї теми, бо інакше просто багато людей, можливо, і не каже, що ми вас туди не посилали.
Maybe do not say we did not send you there, but it doesn't mean that they do not think so. Maybe a lot of people would like to say something along those lines to the veterans, but they don't, just because this issue is being raised at all the forums and so on. And this is obviously one of the reasons why forums like this should be held, to keep people within the framework of what is admissible. Because indeed, there are cases that when people say things to the veterans which really hurt them. So changes are taking place, but we still have a lot to do in this respect. Thank you, Alexander. Well, obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement, but sometimes we have to give ourselves credit as well, because this is the 4th year of genocidal war against Ukraine, and we're still standing strong.
Після обстрілу там уже каву продають.
Because we see the resilience of people on a daily basis. No sooner have the shootings stop when we see that coffee is served and so on. What is the basically the source of all this resilience, in your opinion, Mr. Klitschko?
Хто щось
As regards respect, as regards the recognition, who did more, who did less, who deserves credit more or less, I could give you two. Oh, okay, I can give you one story with the two examples.
Психологічно тяжка функція мене як міського голови.
For me, as the mayor of the city, it is psychologically very tough to visit the hospitals where our soldiers are being treated. Sometimes they are just children in their early 20s,
Без рук, без ніг, без очей.
without limbs, without eyes, badly injured. It's tough to see them.
На жаль, я повинен це зробити.
Even tougher is another function which I have to
Але у мене немає іншого.
which I have to perform, but I have no choice. I cannot get rid of this function. It
Нагороджувати
comes with a job, as it were. This is the function of rewarding the parents of those who have perished,
за їх дітей.
awarding them for
Це
their military deeds, those who have perished. I'm talking about hundreds of parents,
тому що неможливо.
and it's impossible to find the right words.
Дякую. Пишаємось.
We thank you, we're proud of you. It just doesn't cut it. What words could adequately express what you feel in such cases?
Вони плачуть.
1 month ago, I was awarding parents. They were
Ну, я
crying their eyes out.
одну із маму
I was at the podium, and
Володимирович,
one mother of our killed military came up to me and she said, Vitaly, don't you remember me? I met with you some half a year ago.
мої діти пішли добровольцями.
My children went to war as volunteers, and half a year ago you already awarded me.
Це другий раз.
And this
Я
is
до вас більше не прийду,
the second time. She said,
тому що у мене
I'm not
дітей
going to
більш немає.
come again because all my children have been killed.
Отакі от історії, і після цього ми можемо дискутувати, яку повагу ми повинні надавати, шану і так далі.
After stories like this,
Це життєвий
why should we debate whether we have to give respect to our veterans or not? Life goes on, and it is extremely
людям для того, щоб вони, які повернулись, слава Богу, повернулись для того, щоб вони
attentive and respectful to people who, thank God, came back from the front line, so that they feel that the city is taking care of them, that they are also
робимо максимум.
active and worthy members of our society. That's why we
Зараз ми вже
put
працюємо.
in so much effort in creating rehabilitation centers like in Pushchovaditsa,
Цих
and the
людей,
centers for prosthesis for those who have lost their limbs.
але знаєте, що
We
для
did a lot in that respect, but to
шукати, дискутувати, відповіді, що робити, потрібно з ними
not to try and look for answers here, we have to talk to these people as much as possible.
І один раз я зробив
Each of them can tell you his or her own history of life. One time I made a big mistake when a boy came to me in a wheelchair and I said, I understand how the world looks from your position. He said, don't say this. You will never understand how the world looks like from this particular wheelchair.
І тому вкрай
And that's why it is extremely important to communicate with them, to solve their problems. There are many of them, because many boys will come back, and adaptation to the society. And frankly speaking, this is
воювали, вони заплатили найвищу ціну. Ти повинен
this is very important to understand that they fought, you didn't. They paid the highest price, you didn't. And that's why you must understand this social responsibility of this society, and it's important not to leave them alone. Yes, because Russia might also use these problems for making difficulties bigger. Thank you, Vitaly, bringing us to the next topic, which I'm going to discuss with Yulia. Yulia, I know you had a lot of experience of working in various hot points all over the world, and now in Ukraine with your organization, you're engaged into investigation of Russian war crimes, so working with the evil, observing how they bombard civilians, how they kill little children. What have you understood about the evil? Why Russians are like this? Thank you for the question. It's a philosophical issue. I would like to thank our military for allowing us to talk philosophical here in a safe place and not under occupation. About experience about evil, Ukraine is not the only war conflict in the world. Yes, in Ukraine there is the biggest war in Europe, but also there is Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria for many years. And unfortunately, we know that that war, it's a frontier situation, and it's a marginal situation which makes people very different. And we have heroic military, we have heroic volunteers, but on the other hand, we see Bucha, Izum, sexual violence during war. We observe a human safari in Kherson, and in fact, this marginal state, and it's not important whether there is a new war or not. In Ukraine, it is a new war, but in Afghanistan, the war continued since the time of the Soviet invasion. But this status, marginal status, becomes even more acute. But the most important aspect is the lack of responsibility, because in 2021 I worked in Syria, and some days before full-scale invasion I was in Aleppo. I saw the ruined city, and I understood that Ukrainian cities would become like that. And they became like that. Shasta, Marinka, Mariupol. For Russia, it's not the first war. Russians invaded Georgia. They haven't got anything. They bombarded Syria with cluster bomb, supported Assad, and didn't get anything for that. So that lack of responsibility as international responsibility, as collective responsibility. Don't say that all Russians are the same, but we say that there is the country which is an aggressor state, and their crimes of aggression should be prosecuted. But in the world, there is a lack of responsibility which is observed. There are international institutions which do not work, not function properly. In Ukraine, There is prosecutor's office. They are looking for military war criminals and with the aim to prosecute perpetrators. So in fact, there is only one operational mechanism of punishing for crimes, is what our military are doing at the front line, killing their enemies. And this should not be like this in the future. There must be mechanisms of responsibility for crimes. But at the moment, the lack of this responsibility allows evil to continue, leaving Russians to continue committing these war crimes. Sergei, there is an expression that army is able to win the battle, but wars are won by nations. Is our nation able to win this war? Thank you for the question. I'm sure that only Ukrainian nation will decide its own fate. Today we saw some peaceful plans, some other stories, but we forgot to ask Ukrainians what do they want and how do they see it. And whatever norms and frameworks they to put this nation in, everything will end the way our nation wants. And we are very different from our partners. According to our sociological poll and research, dignity and honor is not just words, but they form the character of every Ukrainian. And I think that Ukrainians are the most unusual nation who demonstrated many times that at the darkest times we were prevailing. We stayed alive, that every morning we saw the sun rising and everything started again. So I'm absolutely sure that Ukraine should be regarded in a different way because we are a historical, very deep and powerful nation. Thank you, and I would like to continue this topic with you because I have an impression that the word victory has disappeared from public discourse for various reasons. Now the objective situation is that not only holidays are approaching, but the front line as well. What do you think? What, in your opinion, is the point to which we should come when we realize that everything was not in vain? In principle, I don't share this vision, whether it's in vain or not, because a lot of my brothers and sisters have died in arms, have died. Those who grew up with me. I observed how they grew up. They studied and recreated at our kids' camp Azovets. Those were kids, boys and girls, who grew up together with my daughter, who is now serving at the 3rd Army Corps. And unfortunately, many of her friends, whom I knew as 10 to 13-year-old kids, they died, they're killed. And whether it was in vain or not, it's just morally impossible to think in these terms. Currently, we're responsible for those people who died, and we have to stay till the end, until we all are killed or die from old age. We must defend our children, because that point when you stop and think Whether it was in vain or not,
точка загибелі нації.
most probably that will be the point when the nation dies.
Я не бачу іншого.
I don't see any way out.
Зараз вже не так обговорюється питання перемоги.
Yes, you said that currently people do not speak much about victory, but now we continue standing, and in fact we are moving towards victory, and while we move towards victory, we will leave. When we stop, we will disappear. Thank you, Vitaly. You want to comment on this? I'd like to add.
Непроста тема.
There is a not easy topic. We successfully defend our country. Why successfully? I would like to remind you, year 2022, the international military experts gave us some days, maximum some weeks, against the strongest army in the world. If you remember, almost for 4 years, Putin has been doing everything, all the possibilities to capture our country, and he can't do this. Once again, I can repeat, while we are fighting, nobody would win us. And that's why these attacks or these attempts to spread depression among the people, everything to ruin everything. But once again, I would like to say nobody will prevail upon us until we fight. Yes, it's difficult, it's hard, lots of losses. But if somebody says, raise our hands up and to give up, that would be not a victory, that would be a defeat. And yes, it's very difficult. It's difficult in the front line. It's difficult here, but nevertheless, they cannot achieve their objectives. A number of times they reported certain dates, naming certain dates, and on capturing, or as they call it, liberating Ukrainian territory, and they can't do it. So that's why it's extremely important to support each other, not to struggle inside between ourselves, but to fight against the external enemy with joint efforts. I can give you one example from my life experience, from my life in past life in the sports. When you box, for example, for the third or fourth or fifth or sixth round, your heart rate is 200, and the internal voice tells you, yeah, there is no strength, you are tired. But at that very moment, you should remember that in front of you there is an enemy whose situation is not better, it may be even worse. Resilience is an extremely important component, and this resilience may beat the skills. And I'm sure that we have all the possibilities for this, and we Ukrainians have already surprised the whole world with our will to victory. That's why I believe that we have all the necessary strength to defend our state and to remain an independent state, but not a part of the Russian Empire, which is a dream of Putin.
Thank you. So stamina beats skills. Right. If you've been to various countries, compare, and you study different countries, compared to other countries, what makes our resilience unique? As Lena Kostenko said, Ukraine is a unique case. I would not compare that with various other conflicts because it's wrong to compare people's suffering, human suffering. And of course, we don't have any civil war in this country. But wherever I worked, during conflicts, there was no trust, no faith in the media, in the government, and in all of those countries at war, distrusted one another. And where Ukraine is unique is that back in 2014 and in 2022, we got extremely united. We are skillful in building horizontal ties. A forum like this is a wonderful opportunity to build networks amongst young people. So now you are not alone, you have the whole community to support you. So the crisis, true crisis, emerges when there is no such community. What we have retained, what we have preserved is the state, the democratically elected government. And that's not always the luxury that people have in other countries with armed conflicts or at war. I've got lots of friends who used to work abroad, but then in 2022 they returned because it is our war and we have to defend our country, our land. So that's the core and the root of our resilience. I can't say we will win by all means, but we have everything it takes to will. I understand that these are very difficult times, but being united, being in the network, being in the community, we will be strong. And Václav Havel says hope is not the conviction that something good will end, but that there will be good at the end. So what can you tell us about your country, a country of people who went to the front to defend their land? That's a philosophical question. We are such a country. We are a country that every Ukrainian is proud of, that the world is amazed at. And we were given several weeks at the longest, and we are still standing. The nation, the country, the people have been fighting for their true independence, for their territorial integrity, for their sovereignty for decades, for centuries. And this will to be free is invincible. It is not for the Russians to kill this well. So freedom is our religion. That's what we said during the Revolution of Dignity. So we are the country that can lead by example, that shows what it means to be resilient and to be brave. And without redundant philosophy, I would say that Ukraine is a country where I personally do want to live, and I do want to contribute to the well-being and prosperity of this country. So I wish each and every Ukrainian would see the service to their country as a cause that they identify with. And then it will be a country that everyone loves, inside and outside the country. So we are champions in survival, I'm sure of that. Thank you very much for this conversation. There's a lot of food for thought, and you can continue networking during the coffee break. It will be brief. Please be back in time. Resume our work. Our panel will be called Coding the Future. We've got already several panelists on the stage, and it is my great pleasure to introduce them to you. It's Katerina Mikhalko, Director General, Tech Force in UA. Greet Katerina, please. Then Artem Sikhnov, first director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine in 2015-2020. Thank you, Artem. I also invite Timofey Bryk, rector of Kyiv School of Economics, to this panel. Marina Gritsenko is executive director of an interesting organization that is called Snake Island Institute. Thanks, Marina, for joining in this forum. And we are still waiting for Victoria Yatsenyuk. She's head of Medical Service, 3rd Army Corps, and she will join us very soon. That is me. Okay. And there's also Ksenia Semenova, president of Kyiv Aviation University. Thank you, Ksenia, for being here with us. Sorry for failing to announce you, which means that you will specifically responsible for keeping this whole conversation together. I'm glad that this Kyiv Security Forum for the Young People, called Generation W Squared, is continuing, and we have discussed so far a lot of various topics. But now we will try and put together an idea of what is ahead of us, given all of the previously shared insights and knowledge. I would start with Timofey Bryk, if I may. Timofey Bryk is the rector of Kyiv School of Economics, and he is the youngest rector. Yeah. Now, I am the second youngest. Ksenia was the youngest when she was elected president. Quite recently, Kyiv Security Forum visited with the Kyiv School of Economics, and I was greatly impressed with the School of Economics itself and the questions asked by the students. Sometimes we fail to give as good answers as good questions were asked, but all of those questions were very professional and very profound, I would say. It was the time when the so-called Mindich corruption scandal just erupted, and the students asked the panelists about the role of Timofey Milovanov, for example, and his contribution to the supervisory board of Energoatom. And your students were also active participants of the revolution on cartoons, the Maidan close to the Ivan Franko Theater, which testifies to the values shared by your students and the faculty. On the other hand, we observe a different reality, and we have this is an example of young people who are committed and who contribute to the democratic development of Ukraine. On the other hand, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of young people who've left Ukraine. We do not criticize anyone, but it is just a different edge of the spectrum of various attitudes by the young people. So you, working with the young people, how do you perceive them? What's the specificity of this generation, Generation W Squared? I know that the profile of our student has changed. Before the all-out war started, about half of our graduates dreamt of going to other universities in other countries to do their PhD programs, for example. But the situation is opposite now. Most of them, young men and young women, state that they would remain in Ukraine. They will stay in Ukraine, and nobody doesn't seem to be interested in getting a PhD degree in Berkeley. They say, we want to stay here, we want to be of use. And now the program for engineers is now one of the most popular. We do not specialize in engineering. We do not have a brand related to our School of Economics. But now that's what the young people need, and that's their demand. And young people keep us accountable, I would say. It's sometimes scary to work with them. They are demanding, they've got very noble values, they are good English speakers, but at the same time, they're young people who still lack experience, life experience included. So you characterize our students in a very positive light, and that pleases me a lot, and this makes me proud. But one interesting fact, there was an election the university, and there was an electoral campaign for self-governing bodies for the students at the Kyiv School of Economy. But what happened was just a usual Ukrainian story. They argued and they all broke the relationships, etc. So it looked as a typical Ukrainian pre-election situation. These are talents with huge potential, but they have to learn how to channel this potential in the right direction. They should muster their soft skills and hard skills. It's not enough to have noble values. You have to also know what procedures are about, what institutions are about, and you have to know what discipline is about. We have with us young people who are tracing successful models. Your school is a successful model. It is a state, a country within a country of sorts, and you are looking for ways to retain students. And a lot of people in this audience keep thinking how to stay in Ukraine, be useful, and survive. So what does the government have to do to retain these people in Ukraine, not only for their patriotism, but also for their very conscious choice for them to look for and find self-accomplishment here? My answer might be cynical to a certain degree, and universities would not discuss it publicly. Universities are oftentimes a filter, a sift that is selecting talent. In English, it's called sorting, talent sorting. We work with the young people who are willing to stay in Ukraine, who are willing to study. So we select from amongst those who are patriotic and who are motivated to stay in this country. So it doesn't take much of us to persuade them to stay and be useful. We do not look for people who are ready to work with us. They are willing to work with us. And then we offer them opportunities. Wherever they see opportunities, they are ready to capture them, to seize the day, then to do good, to grow in their profession, to build very successful careers, but they need to have this promise of opportunity. Do you believe that Ukrainian young people who have left will return? I trust sociological opinion polls, and according to them, young adults who have left are willing to come back. At least 30% of those do want to do so. Our next speaker would be Katerina Mikhalko, a bright representative of her generation. And Katerina,
she's the director of the Technological Forces of Ukraine company. They have 6 companies, and at the moment there are 80 companies, and they are all actual producers. So, Katerina, I think the audience would be very much interested in hearing your take on this. What is your secret of success and the implementation of this complicated mission that you've chosen for yourself? Well, I think there are things which help me enjoy what I am doing. And in this audience, there are people who would like to have a meaningful and interesting career. And before the full-scale aggression, I thought that there are global markets like the US, Great Britain, the EU, the steady and stable countries in which there are more opportunities for growth. You go there and your salary is much better. There are institutions where you can get education and so on. But as a matter of fact, all this is about a totally different system in which you have a clear-cut hierarchy with a lot of limitations. I think a great advantage of Ukraine, even if we put aside things like patriotism and responsibility for the future of the country, but in Ukraine there's a lot of rational reasons why one should stay in Ukraine, because you can shape a new system, because the system largely is not in place, and this is something which inspires you, and inspires you to create your own place in this system. We work with weapons producers. Some of our companies produce drones. We have up to 100 companies now, and they are the main suppliers of the armed forces of Ukraine. I mean the suppliers of automated equipment, about 30 million drones per year. It looks like a kind of a closed system of production. And I understand that probably I don't look typical for this kind of field. It might look like I shouldn't be there. And no matter what conference I attend, all the attendants, male, some 55 years old, in the same suits, and any person from Ukraine stands out from the crowd. But our reality is such that we have to undertake responsibility from very early age, the responsibility which people in the West undertake when they are much older. But this gives you an advantage, because on global markets you can enter the rooms where you would not be able to enter if it had a different system. So there are a lot of additional opportunities for young people in Ukraine. And this is one of the secrets of the actualization of my talents. The reason being that I've never been afraid of the unknown. I shaped my own team, and I gathered people around our idea of defending Ukraine. In many other countries, it would have been much more difficult to do that. Well, Ukraine lives in a very challenging environment. There are a lot of post-Soviet hangovers and red tape bureaucratic, and all those things definitely make an impact on your sector as well. But you managed to overcome, and we know that Mikhailo Fedorov is being considered for the position of the head of presidential administration. What's your take on this idea? I think Mikhailo has done a lot for drone production, and I respect him very much. In politics, I very much respect the people who can take unpopular decisions. Like he took a decision for people who produce drones to make more money. It was an unpopular decision, but the industry is very much grateful to that, to him for that. We understand that in your sphere, a lot of problems have piled up. And this is a question of survival, whether we will be able to make it or not, because defense technology is really key. And if we have a good defense industries, this is part of our security guarantee. If there were people from the government, like the presidential administration and the Ministry of Defense, if their representatives were here, what would you tell them by way of saying what they should do to make sure that this really becomes a true security guarantee? Before 2022, our industry was quite Soviet in nature. We produced tanks and armored vehicles, but this is a classical field. A lot of countries produce armored vehicles and so on, but Russia is a very serious enemy, and they can afford send hundreds of thousands of people to the meat grinder. But we are people-centered, and we're totally different from Russia in that respect. That's why we have to do everything possible so that we could lose robots instead of people. So we did this technological breakthrough, and now we have experience and expertise, which very few countries, maybe no other country in the world have. And this is a chance for us to change the geopolitical position of Ukraine, because being an international exporter of weapons and high-tech products, this is really a top position. Only the US, Great Britain, and some other major countries like Russia and China are active on those markets. So Ukraine can have this lever of influence and provide defense products to other countries. It's very important to integrate our sector in the Western world so that our company would be able to launch joint ventures. And that could be the first industry which would be integrated in the EU before Ukraine as a state does so. For us to make it happen, there should be the stabilization of the front line, or the ultimate end to the war. But our industry is very much needed for our partners. This is the first time when we can add value for our partners. We normally just begged for money from them, and we looked like victims. But we're not a victim. We are rebuffing one of the major military forces in the world, and we defend world values from them. So we need to use this window of opportunities and to take our industry to to the UK, Great Britain, the United States. For that, we should lift all the limitations imposed on our industry. Therefore, there should be cleansing of our society of all the problems which have been around for many decades, including the problem of corruption. My next question is to Artem Sitnik. First of all, Artem, I congratulate you on the success of the constitutional reform. and institutional reform. What we see now should be perceived as Ukraine's strong point rather than a weakness. While at the Kyiv Security Forum, it would be natural to bring up the following question. There's one nuance about this system. Will our system of public administration survive this fight against corruption? You mean the state bodies of power? Well, most state bodies of power have lost their agency over the last few years. And this is a huge problem when we hear that 5 managers run the country instead of the institutions that were designed to do so. When I became the director of NABU, I could not imagine that in a number of years we would go through attacks against anti-corruption bodies. And these attacks even became more cynical, because normally they were trying to make believe that this is lawful. But now we see that sometimes they brazenly do this to put pressure on anti-corruption bodies. Recently, I spoke at one conference, and they discussed the issue of an attack on the NABU and anti-corruption prosecutor's office. I said that the survival of the country depends on the outcome of this process. We had a dilemma in the past whether we have to be public about issues like corruption, even though we are fighting now against the formidable enemy. We should be open about this. In 2022, people normally said that we have to prevail in the war and then we'll sort out the corruption issue. I've always said that without combating corruption, we will never be victorious in this war, because this is about providing enough weapons and munitions to the front line. The latest surveys that I saw, that some 80% of respondents say that we have to focus on this issue even during the war. On the one hand, I thought that once we established anti-corruption bodies, we would be public about that, but the war somehow led to the fold-up of some democratic processes. And we saw that there was a lot of debate whether we have to postpone the reform until the end of the war. When we formed NABU, it was a kind of a young body with young people. The average age of workers in NABU was 25 years. I once had a debate with one of my deputies who came from Georgia, and he said that we should hire students. I was against it because I thought that these people should have a certain life experience if they want to take ministerial posts, because it's very important not just to put corrupt people behind the bars, but it's equally important to do it purely within the framework of the law. Otherwise, it'll be no different from the repressions which we are witnessing now against certain NABU personnel. And people who came to this body in 2015 are still there, and they impart their experience to their younger colleagues. I agree with Katerina. When you go abroad, their procedures are more stable because they want to protect their system, which is already shaped, whereas in our country the system is not yet finally shaped, and we have social lifts which can bring the young people up to the positions where they can fulfill themselves and build a new system which we then would be defending from red tape and excessive bureaucracy. Well, Timothy Brick today said that we should make an individual choice whether to stay or not to stay in Ukraine, to find a place for yourself in Ukraine. Katerina Mikhalko is a success story in this model, an example of professional understanding of this sector. The cleansing of this sphere is what Artem Sitnik did as the first head of NABU, and this body was established when, after the Revolution of Dignity, the government of Ukraine implemented the main concept of the reform of justice. And now we come to the external factor. Marina Gritsenko represents the Institute of Snake Island here. And we know a lot about the Snake Island, where our soldiers told the Russians what they're supposed to do. But the Snake Island in translation also means, another name of it is Achilles Island. And this organization maintains that they know how to work with the outside world, including with the Americans.
We are trying to find out, and I think that the results will speak for us. The aim of the organization is to build another entry to Ukraine, which would be systemic. Organization emerged a year ago. Our major audience are Americans, and I always say that our organization was inspired by Trump. They say, oh, excellent, because the major audience are Republicans. I myself lived 5 years in the US, then I came back to Ukraine because I see my values here. When Trump came, we realized that we needed to create new channels of communications. And when we started communicating with Republicans and Democrats, we saw two platforms on which organization was set up. We saw that there is a big demand on communication with young people, Ukrainians who are westernized. And the second is a big demand on systemic presentation of military. And the third is the systemic approach. Very often, in the eyes of Americans, we look chaotic. We're a country of quick decisions, and it's clear. It's got to think about strategic narratives and priorities of national security in the context of 15 years if you have a war in your country. But for our partners to see us as a partners, they must understand that we have a systemic approach. And why Snake Island? Because it's a middle ground between trading routes coming from Ukraine, and our export routes connect our economy with the world. And we decided to become a connection between our defense forces and our military for them to sound in a systemic way to international arena, and they're supported and esteemed by Americans and Western audience in general. We work with many units, and our organization in half consists of veterans. The team consists in half of veterans, another half are young, well-educated girls who were educated in the West, and we allow young people to come back here and to work properly. We've heard news that the strategy of national security of the US has been changed, and they deleted the mentioning of Russian aggression. The war of Russia against Ukraine is called Ukrainian war. European partners should bear a major part of responsibility for what's going on. Frankly speaking, we see absolutely cynical approach. How will you work systematically with this cynical approach? Russia is much stronger than me in a systematic approach. At any level, a couple of years ago, most of a major part of our advocacy was like this. We come, we make photographs, which raise ratings for us here in Ukraine, because we post this in the Facebook in America. But for us to become partners, we have to
Ми подивилися, яким чином основні партнери США поза НАТО, тобто ми подивилися на Тайвань, на Корею, на Саудівську Аравію і на Ізраїль, яким чином вони зав'язали країну на собі так, що не
how Israel connected the country in such a way that in spite of many issues, they still have this connection. This is because of permanent institutional presence there. It's building of routes and channels which would not be political. This is a context with military, with defense companies, economic. It's very hard for me to work in the context of every declaration of Trump. We need to build our presence. First of all, because of analytical work which we do together with military, our information about our military achievements, their priorities, our priorities. For instance, the topic of Black Sea is very interesting for them because it may come to the issue of China and Pacific. China components. This week there were two activities on the topic of parts. America is very much interested when Ukraine comes and says, we see how your reliance on Chinese parts exists. Let's work together on solving this problem. Another very important thing is horizontal cooperation with their military. This year, the Pentagon sent the task to a majority of military units to understand how to realize how to integrate drones in their work. And they ask about it, and we see good opportunity in this because we work with units here. How do they do it in America? For instance, Marine Corps, they have a small element system center where they understand what drones are. They come to us, we teach them, our military teach them something. We get certain assistance from that in response in their
що Україна є важливою. Кожна ланка передається в Пентагон наразі. І таким чином, якщо там 9 основних, там, наприклад, підрозділів Сполучених Штатів військових буде писати у всіх своїх дослідженнях спокійно, не політично, щомісяця, щороку, що Україна є важливою.
They would, in a systemic way, inform and understand that systematically they receive assistance and information from Ukraine. And then they would have a foundation of champions for us. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, is it interested in your activities? Yeah, we're in a contact with the Foreign Ministry and with our embassy, but we are a private, non-profit organization. What is important for us? And there is a request in America for other channels of communication from Ukraine, and we are trying to represent army there. Thank you very much. Now I'm getting to the talk with Ksenia Semenova, who is a real star. In 2025, she was included into the list of leaders, strength of women by Ukrainska Pravda, and also included into a list of 100 best people from NV. So your mission now is to make a conclusion on what we have heard today. Technologies and youth. As a president of a very well-known university, Kyiv Aviation University, how do you see this dimension of technological breakthrough with participation of youth, and what problems do you see in preparing young people to participation in this area of life? Thank you. As I said, well-known university, I will have a brief explanation. The role of youth is so high that the state have always realized the role of youth. That's why political universities have always been political instruments. Aviation University, its team community who created Aviation University, emerged in 1919 when the Association of Flyers emerged in Kyiv, and then Odessa entrepreneurs procured license in France, building aircraft in Odessa, in Kyiv, well-known aircraft designers emerged, and in Ukraine, at the same time as in Europe, they started building airplanes, share their ideas and views and visions. Later on, in the Soviet times, the youth and universities became the source of new ideas, including national ideas. That's why Aviation University was changed into service, not into the design in university. And there were people who said that we have to train not engineers, but those who use, the users of planes. So the same companies develop arms, train how to use these arms, service arms. So that's the full cycle. And in the Soviet Union, the idea was not to have the full cycle of anything. That's why there were universities separated between each other. And in Kyiv, they trained only the users, and the designers were brought to Russia. And we are still overcoming those ideas, those points. And when we work with professors who are very competent from scientific point of view, and their scientific school, which they have to share, those but we turned into a defense tech university, and we work with defense companies a lot, and we position ourselves this way. We get a lot of comments in the network, and our team believes, and students also join us, that the only normal role for technical university in the country, which in a situation of full-fledged war, is participation in defense production, development, and we are building a new, nice technical university, because there are no high-level technical universities in Ukraine. This is a bad news which I have. If we look at the laboratories which they have in the average Polish university, it is much better than in the best Ukrainian universities. But if we speak about personnel, political will, motivation to work and to create, nobody could compare with Ukraine. This is because we are objectively in such a situation. Very good. We have a possibility to ask 2 questions from the audience. Please, you may ask your questions. Ask brief and concrete questions. My name is Artur. I would like to get deeper into the topic of Ukrainian youth in Ukraine and abroad, because I now am working on the state project aimed at bringing back as many as possible young Ukrainians to Ukraine. And Timothy said that 25 to 30% say that they would be able to come back. The question is, do we believe that this percentage can substantially be increased? And the second question, what concrete steps should be taken by the state for this to become a reality in a short and medium-term perspective? Briefly speaking, the whole international experience of migration shows that the longer a person is in a status of migrant or refugee, the less is the possibility or probability that this person will come back. People get new contacts, socializing, children go to the preschool, school. It becomes more and more difficult to come back. Speaking about youth, young people may open new career paths over there. I don't think we'll be able to increase these figures. We have to fight and to struggle for keeping these figures. But this is a normal figure. I'm not going to dramatize what should be done. I would express my personal opinion. I don't like when we say immediately, what should the state do? I spoke about society and markets. I think it's about business, it's about jobs, it's about opportunity to establish your own business or to join business. I think that a big role will belong to local communities, and from the point of view of the regulator, this definitely would be a question of housing and business climate.
If I could add very briefly, I studied in the USA, a very prestigious university, totally with the stipend, and people who studied in the universities of the Ivy League, they would not come back to their countries. And I believe that it is an illusion that you can achieve much more and much faster abroad. Now, I am 24 and I'm the leader of the organization, CEO of the organization. I would have never achieved that in the USA. All of my professors say that I should not get back to the USA because with my skills, I would still be an assistant rather than a CEO. And sometimes I support people who wish to come back. I'm looking for good opportunities for employment here. But when people realize that you can achieve a lot of things, wonderful, very interesting, very high-value things that will bring you good income in Ukraine in the early age, then it is attractive. So then I was doing my bachelor's program in New York, and I returned to Ukraine every summer for the internship, and that's exactly what helped me retain my contact. And when I graduated from the university, I knew where I want to be. Now I have got a program not related to security advocacy. It was the internship program. A guy from the University of Alabama said that he would like to come to Ukraine and spend summer there, and he would then seize his career as working in the intelligence sector. And now we are recruiting a new team for the January internship program. I have 19 people in my team, and then I will more trainees or actually interns than the team. We don't have this capacity, but still I would risk to do that. And 2 people from that team say that they would stay longer in Ukraine. So we have to stimulate this culture, showing people how Ukraine is developing and attract them thus. One more question from the audience. That would be the very last one, okay? Thank you very much for this opportunity. My first question was asked by the colleagues there. My second question is linked to it. Artem said that public authorities here from time to time lose their agency become dependent on the groups of influence? How can we put in place a whole system of checks and balances? I watched the very recent session of Parliament where they voted for the budget, and after this vote there were several more issues to consider, but the MPs kept asking the Speaker whether they were going to discuss some of those issues or whether they would be voting with no discussion. That seems strange because the Parliament is a place where people parle, that's speak, discuss. So how can we change this culture in this society? The absence of checks and balances is sometimes an element of speedy decision-making, but then this decision-making system can sour because of the lack of checks and balances. So, and with the whole entire democratic world is based on the framework of checks and balances. Now the Parliament feels freer, much freer after the publication of those tapes and after the scandal. But before that, the members of Parliament did not have this practice, this custom of discussing things, because they knew that decisions would be actually given to them as ready-made things. And if one political force is entitled to form the government, then the government would not consider cases and will listen to the presidential office. I remember how it was when Arseniy was prime minister. Various political forces came up with their ideas, then the government had to discuss it, they had to look for compromise, and that was beneficial to all. That's the way of introducing checks and balances. And now we see that mono majority is detrimental to democracy. And I hope that a true coalition will be set up, and then they will appoint a truly coalitional government. Thank you very much. That would be the end of this panel. But I would ask all of the panelists to give a very short answer to my question, and it sounds like this. We are all of us are looking for the source of optimism, for hope and strength. What's your expectations of the upcoming year? This will be a great year, particularly if everyone who is present here will do their best to contribute to our joint cause, for us to survive as a nation. It will be a hard year of hard work and satisfaction from the results. You won't be bored. That I can promise you. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know how to answer it. I am an optimist, and in the darkest times, I think about good things. And I think that we are about to enter a period with the new definition of this future. Will there be a ceasefire? Will there be a truce? Will it be beneficial to Ukraine or not? So we will always be facing very hard choices, and we will have to draw our match. It will be the red horse or fire horse. Yeah. it will be a decisive year, I think. And I hope that Ukrainians will be consolidated as they usually are when they face such challenges. So we will win maybe this year, next year, I mean, in 2026. I recollected several moments of 2022 when I told myself that the all-out war makes me think that it might last my entire life. I hope it won't be so, but this supports me in my everyday activity, because the reality is hard and we cannot actually suspend our lives, our living, our activities, and we have to treat life realistically. And I also recollected the words my boss once told me. It's Alexei Sobolev, who is the Minister of Economy now. He said, it's so exciting to have one goal for the entire life, just to make sure that Ukraine retains its agency and eventually wins. It's very good that we, in this young age, can get this goal driving us ahead for the interests of Ukraine and our exciting future. Yes, we are happy people indeed. Yeah, I am guided by two principles that I will share with you. If you don't like something, change it. And the second one is be at the front line or work for the front line. And I hope that you will share these principles and you will find an opportunity to achieve certain impact. Back in 2022, we all felt we were citizens of this country and that we matter. We can make a difference, and we can make a difference for the front line, and we can make the difference in the rear to change what we don't like by being helpful and useful to the country. Now we have this opportunity to discuss all of that because our young men and women, and not very young men and women, are there at the front line fighting for us. Thank you. Thank you. It was an inspiring panel. So let us give them a round of applause. Marina Gritsenko, Katerina Mikhalko, Artem Sitnik, Timofey Brik, Ksenia Semenova. Thank you very much to all of you. And now, without any breaks, we will have another discussion. It will be a concluding discussion. Thank you. So it will be a very special discussion between Arseniy Yatsenyuk and Vitaly Portnikov, and you, young people, will have an opportunity to ask them questions no matter how hard. So it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Olena Konopla, who is the communications director of the Open Ukraine Foundation.
Вітаю.
Olena, over to you. Good afternoon, everyone. So this would be the concluding discussion, and so I am inviting to this stage Chair of the Kyiv Security Forum, Prime Minister of Ukraine in 2014-2016, Arseniy Yatsenyuk,
І відомого журналіста.
and a very popular journalist, blogger and host, TV host, Vitaly Portnikov. We've got about 30 minutes. 20 minutes would be allocated to the dialogue between our two speakers and 10 minutes for Q&As.
5 грудня сьогодні.
So It's the 5th of December, 31 years ago, the Budapest Memorandum was signed, shall I say, an infamous memorandum, as a result of which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons for nothing, for no tangible guarantees. How do you assess that memorandum in hindsight, particularly in the context of the so-called peace talks between the USA and Russia?
Well, the first conclusion is that signing memorandum without guarantees of security, and we gave up the third largest nuclear potential in the world, and as a result, on the paper, we received the so-called assurances. If you read the original text, there's not a single word guarantee there. And even if there were words like guarantee, they would not have been supported by anything, because the American administration said that they were not going to ratify this memorandum. That was at the closed negotiations. I can only quote President Clinton, who basically apologized to the Ukrainian people for having signed that memorandum. Well, we are glad that they apologized, but the fact remains that signing that memorandum without legal guarantees of security for Ukraine basically laid the road to the occupation of Ukraine at that time. There were a lot of Ukrainians who believed then that Russia would try to invade Ukraine and try to restore the Russian Empire, but the world turned a blind eye to that. And starting from 2014, I had to persuade our allies that in the Crimea, these are not some mysterious green men, but regular Russian army. After that came the Georgian war and the refusal to give Ukraine a map for NATO. If miracle happens, I emphasize miracle, and some actual peace negotiations lead to a peace deal, we should never repeat the mistake like the one which was the signing of the Budapest Memorandum. Mr. Portnikov, we should also understand the state of our society and the state of Western societies in that time. The elections had been held, and the candidate with pro-Russian agenda won and even the cautious attempts of Leonid Kravchuk to move away from Russian. That was the fight between Mr. Kravchuk and Mr. Kuchma. But among them, the Ukrainian citizens opted for Kuchma, who was obviously inclined to coming closer to Russia. Recently, the president of Ukraine said that he would trade security guarantees for NATO. Who wanted NATO at that time? Before 2014, most people in Ukraine did not want Ukraine to be in NATO. Even with the election of Leonid Kravchuk, it was a choice without a choice. And that situation lasted for about 30 years. Next to me sits the then head of the Parliament of Ukraine, who signed the request to NATO to give us membership in NATO, in spite of the considerable resistance from many MPs, like the Party of Regents and so on. So I don't understand what kind of security guarantees we're talking about if Ukrainians themselves kind of wanted to come closer to Russia. And Americans were logical in that President Bush of the US at one point in time, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, cautioned Ukraine from seceding from the Soviet Union. But Ukraine did not heed that suggestion. We announced our independence, but we failed to provide for our security. Americans wanted to interfere somehow because they knew that there could be a conflict, but they didn't want to be responsible for that because they understood the risks which might come after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I want to add something to that. The historic paradox is that President Kuchma in 2003 adopted the law on the national security of Ukraine, which includes the Ukraine's future membership in NATO. Then President Kuchma comes back from Brazil and goes to Tuzla because at that time Putin had already started this testing operation of capturing Tuzla. So basically the Budapest Memorandum became a foundation for the two superpowers in the world. That was a joint policy, the US and Russia, to make sure that the NPT treaty is not violated. But now the situation is such that a lot of countries who want to get nuclear weapons got a very serious argument in favor of nuclear weapons. They say, well, you want us to join NPT, but Ukraine is without nuclear weapons and it lost 20% of its territory. It was attacked by a nuclear power, so this is a huge historic lesson, but we are paying for this painful lesson. We watch the negotiations about peace on a daily basis. Mr. Yatsenyuk, who and how in the main actors should do for Ukraine to get an acceptable peace plan? Well, but first I would like to take two questions which came before from the audience. The first one, what the state should do in order for people who have left to come back. I will tell you this, if there are no conditions for a realistic and secure peace, we can speak about anything, universities, economy, institutes, but without security guarantees, people will not come back, and even those who stay will probably decide to leave. This is a key issue. If we speak about the so-called peace talks, I don't think that there are any peace talks in place. For me, this is a kind of a smoke screen. They just go through the motions. This is imitation. Everyone is involved. Russia is playing this game, and all the others either make believe that they enjoy it or they take part in this game. And within this game, we have not approached a realistic peace, not a single millimeter, because what is going on in assistance to Ukraine is related to real peace. What is happening in geopolitics, I mean, additional sanctions, tightening the screws on China and India, that would be about real peace. But in reality, nothing of the above is happening. Instead, there's some kind of spoof negotiations just for Putin to buy time. And Mr. Portnikov, I totally agree with this for one reason. There's a lack of understanding. What is peace about if the war is going on? This is primarily about ceasefire. And President Trump from January this year up to the Alaska meeting was trying to persuade Putin to ceasefire. After Alaska, something happened in the mind of Putin, and he started saying that there should be a peace deal first, and part of the peace deal should be about ceasefire. Not a single war in the world ended that way, except for those where certain countries capitulated. So until and unless we have ceasefire in place, all this will be just meaningless back and forth. The US president wants to keep his reputation. That's why everyone is making believe that peace talks are in place. I don't know where this bubble will burst. This is only a matter of time. The final question from me and then from the audience. We have a political crisis in Ukraine. Mr. Yatsenyuk, what do you think should be done by the state, by each and every one of us, to keep unity?
It's a billion-dollar.
This is a billion-dollar question, as Americans say. To keep unity, you have to keep it. We have to back up the legitimacy of the institution of presidency. You all read different views about that, about what kind of changes can happen in the Ukrainian system of government. I believe that if the system of presidency in Ukraine will be upended, since the president is commander-in-chief, this will just lead to a repeat of history for Ukrainians. We've been through that. The main thing we have to ensure is the president understands his responsibility vis-a-vis the country. And here we cannot make any mistakes. And the same about the president. He has no right to make a mistake. And here we have the only difference in our views with Mr. Portnikov as regards the government of national unity. I think that this model is not workable, whereas Mr. Portnikov believes that this model would be quite functional. So this is an issue of keeping political stability, if we can call it that way. It's not even political stability, just the vestiges of manageability and controllability of the state. And point number 3, we have to sort out the issue of finance. There's a $70 billion gap in the budget, and if we fail to bridge this gap, we will never win the war. You cannot win without money. And the final point is what the director of the Aviation Institute said. If everyone does his or her job, we will emerge victorious. I believe that there's no political crisis in Ukraine. There's a crisis of the system of public administration, which started in 2019 after the election of the president. And now people have noticed that this is a crisis. It just has become clear. But for me, it was clear on the day when Zelensky was inaugurated as president of Ukraine. That was a crisis of the government in Ukraine with the subsequent total failure. So the only way for us is to go about is to strengthen the institution of the presidency and the parliament, the forming of a legitimate government by the parliament, and the responsibility and accountability of the government to the parliament, cooperation between the parliament and the government. This is what we mean by this. If we don't like the notion, the government of national unity, you can use the notion of Mikita Paturayev, who is an MP, call it a government of national resilience. That's how a country can operate if it doesn't want to disappear from the map of the world. You think if a government of national unity or resilience is established and different political forces are included, including solidarity and the fatherland, which are headed by the ex-president, ex-prime minister, each of them wants to be a president and continue their career. Do you think it would be workable? No, I want the MPs to nominate people for the government. Whether they will include representatives of solidarity or the fatherland will depend on the results of their coalition talks. If they believe that the deputies from the European solidarity or fatherland, that they are more professional than the servant of the people, that would be efficient. If the servant of the people will continue to insist that they are efficient, they will be held responsible for this. But this will be their responsibility and not the responsibility of 3 or 4 managers who are running our country during the wartime. Well, I have a slightly different vision of this. If we take a look at the composition of the MPs, some 90% of MPs are people who have nothing to do with politics. They were not voted for. People voted for Volodymyr Zelensky, so those people cannot bear political responsibility because they are not politicians a priori. For me, political activity is a profession. People should understand what to do, not just to read, but some of them can't even read. Well, you have a very optimistic view of our government. Well, we have a political debate here now, but we, at the same time, have questions from the audience. What I'm talking about is the readiness of the servant of the people to undertake responsibility for what they do. They promised it to do so, so why don't they do it 6 years later? But people voted for Zelensky, not for themselves, but they became members of parliament. So basically there's only one person with agency, President Zelensky. Well, formally, you are right, but we have to restore the system of legitimate power in the country.
Let's get to the questions. Dear participants, you have 10 minutes to ask questions to Vitaly Portnikov and to Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Please, the girl in the second row. Good evening. I'm Anna, politology student. I have a comment on international guarantees. It's very difficult to believe in them. There is a process of negotiations. As a result, we'll have a paper. Maybe it's written guarantees. Who will fulfill this paper in life? There will be written that coalition will be sent. Who will send it? Maybe it's necessary to build contacts and structures with partners or allies where they will not be able to reject this paper. I believe that currently in the world there are no real international guarantees. They do not exist. We have to think on ceasefire. The ceasefire will allow us to accumulate resources for the next war. International guarantees were functional when the United States promised to defend Europe at any conditions. They do not do this now. They now declare that they are not going to defend Europe and even reduce their presence in NATO mechanisms if Europe do not increase its defense ability. There are no guarantees that Americans will defend Europeans, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland from Russia. What guarantees are you speaking about? There are no international guarantees in the world. The international guarantees were related to the fact that one big nuclear
відповідальності, кордони її союзників. Це закінчилося. Більше ніяких гарантій немає. А існують дві ядерні надпотуги. Ну і друга з половиною – це Китайська Народна Республіка. Все. Або нам вдається для цих країн встановити якісь неможливі для них втрати в разі нападу на нас, або вони нас завойовують.
This could be either we may incur big losses to those countries who are aggressive, or they will win. The guarantees may be effective only in one case when they are supported by specific things. For me, security guarantees is not that the Congress would ratify it in case of attack against Ukraine, the United States would defend Ukraine. Whether they will do it, it's a big question mark. The international security guarantee is the first 10-year as a minimum, clear financial agreement with the obligation of our country's guarantors to finance Ukrainian army. The second, supply very clear amounts of weapons. The third, placement on the territory of Ukraine missile defense and missiles such as Tomahawk. When our EU allies give us long-distance weapons, it's just real guarantee. The fourth, training centers on the territory of Ukraine, and the fifth would be the military bases of the countries which are guarantors on the territory of Ukraine. You may give an example of Israel, for instance. Between the United States and Israel, there is no ratified by the Congress agreement on providing guarantees or providing military assistance. They have memorandum of understanding, which was signed 10 years ago, not ratified by the Congress, but the United States provides $3 billion annually for the security of Israel. Therefore, guarantees without clear deliverables, things which are in Ukraine, armaments, money, missiles, missile defense, intelligence, there's nothing. When these guarantees are supported by concrete things, these are real guarantees. My name is Tatiana Petrek. I am the postgraduate student in Ternopil. My question is to Vitaly. Is it possible to new international architecture of security while Russia remains in the same form on the map of the world? I don't think that there is an issue of any new international security architecture. After the Helsinki approaches were ruined, Helsinki Agreement was recognized by the Soviet Union, which was in a much serious geographic margins than the Russian Federation. This is from what you are saying means that Russian Federation should build a new borders, which is Putin saying. The last question. Sure. Very briefly. My name is Orisa. I'm independent researcher. Question to Arseniy. I fully agree with Vitaly concerning the government of national salvation, as we call it sometimes. But you said about restoration of institutions. What do you mean by this? And who should do this restoration of the institutes? And the second, is there any threat that the managers which are living Zelensky would be substituted by other people and will restore again the situation when everything is ruled by one person? My answer will be very brief. I believe that restoration of renewal of institutions will be possible only after the end of the war and parliamentary and presidential elections. I don't think that now there is a possibility and ability of the current political establishment to restore, to renew institutions. I want the current political establishment to do everything possible for the war to finish at conditions which would Ukraine agree with, and for us, after that, for us to have a politically responsible system of public administration in Ukraine. My question would continue, would follow up your answer. And concerning the point that Arseniy said that people voted not for members of parliament but for Zelensky. And then Vitaly said that in 1990s people voted for pro-Russian candidates and forces. I have a question. What can we do for people to be more responsible in their choices? Because voting for the members of parliament means getting a
якщо це можливо віднайти, як зробити так, щоб люди були свідомі в своїх виборі і робили цей вибір, користуючись своїм правом голосу, більш відповідально. Дякую. Питання, хто може, той відповідає.
Ми вже 30 років мучимося.
we've been trying to answer this question for 30 years. When you say that people should be responsible, did people in 2019 voted responsibly? They wanted to vote for people who didn't have positions, biography, and experience in politics because they had to lead the country. Did anyone deceived people? Did anyone said that I was a minister and have a lot of political experience? They said, no, I was not a minister. I didn't have any political experience. Vote for me. And people voted. This is the ideal system of changing corruption. If we cannot exterminate corruption among the members of parliament and ministries, we need to create a system which would change members of parliament. They will change after they get corrupt. The new ones again will become corrupt. So it will be like moving on the circle. And for people to know where to steal money when now the members of parliament are suspected in organized criminal group. What can we say? It's enough for us to know about current system of public administration, and the member of parliament was organizer of the criminal group. Who would think about it? Everyone could think about it, but didn't think at all. So we are living in the world of new information technologies. People would not be interested in this, and we have to break through to reality in the darkness of these new conditions. In addition, The Guardian published an article on how artificial intelligence could influence political processes. I think that many of you make use of AI. I'm against it because it doesn't agree with me, doesn't want to listen to me. Not to say that it has been making lots of incredible mistakes concerning historic facts or developments, but it started impacting the political conscience of people. Speaking about what Vitaly said, I would say first is critical thinking. If a person doesn't have critical thinking, this person would believe into miracles, and this will end very badly, because when person sees a reality, this comes to bad results. But for having critical thinking, you should have proper level of education, and to have proper level of education, you should get values. Values you get from your parents and from the society. For this, you have free media. Mass media say, stop, this is not round, this is a square, this is not black, this is white. It's very complicated answer, but only this way democracy is being built. I will tell you from my political experience. I came to the podium in the parliament and said, my government is the government of kamikaze. I said, I will raise taxes, I will raise tariffs, I wouldn't raise pensions because I don't have money for this. And for you to know that in 2014 I won the election, it's a historical fact, but not for a long time. But it appeared that even without populist agenda, you could win an election. Another thing that after you won the election, you should maintain the level of support in order to implement what you wanted. And here we had difficulties, and difficulties were connected to a situation that democracy needs instruments of protection. There are not that many instruments of protection, beginning with independent media and political competition. The last question. Thank you. My name is Eduard. I would like to ask you a question concerning the previous session. In the section, we were told that we lack strategic approach in Ukraine in order to formulate certain policies in the context of rebuilding of Ukraine in a strategic sense after the end of the hostilities. What would be your ideas and principles or concepts on which the rebuilding should take place, or building of new economy, institutions, and so on. Your vision would be very interesting to hear. Frankly speaking, I would wait till the end of the war. I don't know what territory we would have. I don't know how many people we would have on these territories. I don't know which guarantees of security we would have, and on the dependent investment climate. I don't know whether Ukraine join European Union. It's a task with many unknown elements. Otherwise, there's no sense to forecast anything. I can only agree with this. In 2022, they started forming a recovery conference. I had a discussion with wonderful people who said that it's a main issue now. I said, are you saying we have to stop to finish war, and then we would think about how to recover Ukraine? You substitute notions. Instead of calculating how many billions we need to win the war, you start to think what we need when we finish the war. We haven't yet finished this war. Continuing the tradition, I would like you to say a couple of words. This is the end of the year. St. Nicholas Day is approaching. What will be the next year? I don't know. Not easy. Thank you very much for this discussion. A round of applause.
Передаю мікрофон.
I'm giving the floor to my colleague Taras Berezovets. So ahead of us, we have some surprises.
Vitaly, I don't know what it was, but I think that at the end we saw a clone of yours. I hope it wasn't AI. So we are nearing the completion of today's event, and I would like to
мінометника підрозділу «Мінотавр» 68-ї єгерської бригади Павла Вишибабу під ваші оплески. Хтось забрав наше крісло. Ну, сідайте.
Minotaur unit of the 68th Jaeger Brigade, writer and musician. Good afternoon. Frankly speaking, I've come to recite a poem for you. I decided to opt for one poem, and since we are discussing the new generation, the future, and coding our future, so I decided to write an anti-utopia, dystopia of sorts. Robots and archaeologists have carved out something which is really valuable. That's the former empires of Aztecs and Incas. And there are more radios than smartphones. They had books and works of art together with their munitions, and they woke up to defend themselves. I don't know whether they slept at all. Instead of the passport, they had the tokens hanging from their necks, and they had sleeve patches, and the hospitals were scattered along the river banks, and newborn babies were given to their mothers wrapped in pixel because there was no other cloth, and only military shops were operating. Nobody knows why that happened. Nobody knows how long they had paid so much for their country and their freedom. Their poet was writing the poems by hand, and then they would carve the same lines on the walls. Oh my God, what have they done to us? What have they done to us? What have they done to us? Thank you.
І на завершення поставимо ефектну.
And the very end will be very effective. Servicemen of the unmanned system forces, Moisei Bondarenko, will perform a song that has become the musical ambassador of Ukraine. I first heard it in the movie Home Alone. It was performed in English as the Carol of the Bells, but it is a Ukrainian song. It was written in the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, which is in the epicenter of a fierce fighting, and it used to be a hub through which all logistical routes used to go, and we passed this city dozens of times, and we would step over there, and it was a city with very good coffee. Moisei, over to you.
Дякую всім учасникам сьогоднішньої конференції. Дякую всім нашим гостям, нашим спікерам, але найбільше дякую нашим сьогоднішнім організаторам.
Thank you very much to all of the speakers, to all of the participants, to the organizers of this forum. Arseniy Yatsenyuk Foundation Open Ukraine and Kyiv Security Forum. Could you please join me on the stage for a family picture?